I would say I'm a Grand Canyon enthusiast. I love it. For me, there's nothing better than getting in the car, heading up to the Grand Canyon, and spending as much time as possible there. Something about seeing it in person, even if you've seen a million movies and posters and whatnot, even that iconic shot, it's still, to be there and see the birds flying and feel the rush of the wind, it's still unique. It's still special.
Hey, this is Cindy Scott from Cinder's Travels. Welcome to the Locals Know Best podcast. This is episode 7. Locals Know Best is a bi-weekly podcast where my guests share the places and outdoor travel adventures they love most, right in their own backyards. Topics range from unique lodging options, treasured outdoor activities, favorite dining spots, and a breakdown of whether the insta-famous and possibly overrated spots in town are even worth checking out. Today, we're going to be talking with Brandon Perlow about his perfect 2-day itinerary for hiking down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and then back up again. Brandon is an avid traveler and adventure seeker. He's been to all 7 continents, all 50 states, and has lived abroad as well as across the country. These days, he calls Arizona home with his family, and he chose Arizona in a large part due to the incredible choices of outdoor adventure. To him, of those many options, one reigns supreme: Grand Canyon National Park. One small note about today's episode: at one point, Brandon gets into the really important nitty-gritty details of obtaining lodging permits and reservations. Please bear in mind, this episode was recorded on October 23rd of 2020, so if you're going to be planning this trip, you'll need to adjust for different dates of availability. If you want to follow along with links to all the places we're talking about and a map of the area, this episode's show notes can be found at localsknowbestpodcast.com/7. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get into the episode. I am so excited to chat with you today, Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Cindy. Me too. This is awesome. Congrats on the pod.
Thanks. Thanks so much for listening.
Absolutely. Hey, I loved all the episodes, and I've covered a lot of the country, but never been to Bend, Oregon. So gotta get out there now.
Oh, yeah, that is such a great place. And Swiss did such an amazing job describing it. It's beautiful there.
Yeah, I could visualize it. So that's my goal for today. Try to give some of that captivating beauty for all of the listeners for the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, yay. I'm so excited. Okay, well, tell us why you picked that place to talk about today.
Sure. So I've lived in Arizona for 4.5 years now, but I've been to the Grand Canyon many times before that. I would say I'm a Grand Canyon enthusiast. I love it. For me, there's nothing better than getting in the car, heading up to the Grand Canyon, and spending as much time as possible there. The Grand Canyon gets 6 million visitors per year, so there's a lot of people who go, but almost everybody visits just a few spots along the way. Only 7% of visitors hike into the canyon at all, and fewer than 1% actually make it all the way to the bottom. Once you get further and further down, it's a completely different world. And I love that. I love that feeling of being down there. What we're going to talk about, the national parks and the corridor trails, I've covered all of these multiple times. So I would say I'm pretty experienced with this itinerary. So I can share my own firsthand experience. And yeah, I'm excited to share more about it.
Have you covered these trails at different times of the year?
Yeah, I have. So it's interesting, visiting the Grand Canyon, most people are going to visit from the rim, from the top. And the top is anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 feet in elevation. So the best time to visit the Grand Canyon, if you're staying along the rim, is typically summer. It's peak season, it's very busy, but you're going to have great weather. And that's kind of the time to go. If you're hiking, and what we're going to talk about is hiking all the way to the bottom and back, it's the opposite. So I would say the best time is winter, although you can get quite a bit of snowfall. So peak season is probably late fall, early spring, as far as best time on the trails.
Okay. Yeah, without getting covered in snow.
Exactly. So I was going to say November. We're gonna do this hike in November in my perfect world. But I've hiked some of these trails in the middle of summer. Don't recommend that.
What is it like in the summer?
The inner canyon, which is kind of the final 1,000 feet as you descend towards the Colorado River, It's typically referred to as the box. When you're in the box in the summer, in the afternoon, it can get as high as 115 degrees in the shade, and it can feel up to 140 degrees on your skin.
Whoa.
So brutal conditions. I mean, these are strenuous hikes in perfect conditions, but to take that on, you really have to be kind of next level adventurer. It's not something that I would recommend.
Okay, I totally understand the November recommendation then. The perfect time to hike, in my opinion, is when it's like 50s and 40s. You like never overly sweat. You work up warmth.
Exactly. Yeah. So November at the rim, it could be as cold as freezing, but typically in the 40s, like you're saying. It'll warm up though. So as you descend, it gets hotter and hotter. But even at the bottom of the canyon, it shouldn't be warmer than 80s. So that's kind of the sweet spot and the best way to avoid triple digits in the inner canyon, but also avoid that snow and ice up at the top.
Okay, well, let's get into your perfect day of outdoor adventure is actually going to be more like a perfect weekend. You really want to do like a 2-day adventure here, which I think is great.
Absolutely. So for all your listeners who are looking at the show notes, there's this great brochure that the National Park Service puts out. It's called Introduction to Backcountry Hiking. And so if you're listening, I highly recommend pulling this up because a lot of what I'm going to recommend comes from this brochure. There are thousands and thousands of miles of trails in Grand Canyon National Park. But if you've never done this before, stick to the corridor trails. Start with South Kaibab, and then we're going to come up Bright Angels. You're going to see far more rangers, so if there's any issues, help is nearby. There's far more hikers as well, and the trails are the best maintained of any in the park. My recommendation, if you're going to go all the way to the bottom, the National Park Service says you have to take at least 2 days. Now, there's a whole bunch of people who don't listen to that advice, but personally, I do. They really only recommend you hike 1 to 3 miles as part of a one-way day hike.
And is that mostly because of recovery time needed? It's just really strenuous?
Yeah, so a lot of it's just because it's strenuous. The other thing that's very different about hiking a canyon compared to hiking a mountain, if you think about hiking a mountain, worst case scenario, you start to fatigue, you get tired, you just turn around where you are and descend relatively easily into safety. Well, at the canyon, it's the opposite. The easy part's going down, and they say you should take twice as long to go back up. And if you're already at the point of fatigue and then you decide to turn around, you can get yourself into trouble. So you have to kind of listen to your body and the advice of these park rangers a little bit more seriously when you're doing canyon hiking compared to mountain hiking.
What's the mileage of this whole trip?
So the first day is about 7.5 miles down South Kaibab to Phantom Ranch. And then the second day is about 10 miles from Phantom Ranch up to the Bright Angel Trailhead. So 17.5 miles roughly in total.
Whoa, and the second day is longer.
Second day is longer. The reason why you hike down South Kaibab and up Bright Angel is because South Kaibab is a little bit steeper. So you don't necessarily want that on the uphill, but also year round, there is no water on South Kaibab. So you tend to need less water going downhill, whereas going uphill, you're going to want to refill. And water is a really important thing whenever you're hiking, but especially here. And the other thing, so there is water at various points on these hikes, but it's never guaranteed. So the Grand Canyon, there are pipe breaks all the time in the canyon, and you have to be ready to not be able to fill up, even though traditionally it can be available. So I always bring iodine tablets. Make sure you have some way to purify water.
So speaking about gear, if someone's going to do this 2-day trip, what do you recommend they have in their pack with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the most important thing is water. You got to have at least a 3-liter water. And then you also have to have that emergency purification, whether it's tablets or a filter, something like that. You definitely want food, snacks to kind of make it on the hike both ways. So this doesn't go in your pack, but hiking poles are highly, highly recommended. You're going to want to use hiking poles. It's going to take a lot of the pressure off of your knees as you hike down, but it's also going to help you as you kind of use your upper body to pull yourself up and out of the canyon. Depending on time of year, you may want over the shoe traction devices, so micro spikes. We're doing this in November, so we're escaping the snow and ice, but the trails do get quite a bit of snow and ice as we get into winter. And so that's something that you absolutely have to have if you're hiking in those seasons. Otherwise, the rest of it is just clothes. You want a variety of layers because of the change in temperatures. Again, it can be in the 80s at the bottom, and then you get to the top and it's below freezing. So you definitely want a range of that. You're going to want flashlights with emergency batteries. The flashlights are really good down at Phantom Ranch because once the sun goes down, it is dark. There's not a lot of light. So that's helpful. But then also, if it takes us extra time getting out of the canyon, we're going to want a headlamp or a flashlight or something for those last miles. And I've finished the hike in the dark before, which is perfectly fine, but you want a light source. And I'd say that those are probably the main things. As far as snack foods, these hikes are rated as strenuous, so you want something that even if you're feeling uncomfortable, you're going to be able to get down. So for me, that's usually like Pringles and a Snickers bar, something like that. Even if I'm not feeling 100%, it's not going to be a problem to eat those things because you need the calories whether you feel like it or not.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's just jump into what we're doing, what we're seeing. Where are we starting off our first day?
So our day one, we're going to wake up. We're at El Tovar Hotel. We're at what's referred to as the Village in the South Rim. It's all about location. They have certain rooms where you wake up and you're staring at the expanse of the Grand Canyon, which is pretty incredible. So you're in the best spot. It opened in 1905, so the hotel is actually older than the national park, which is pretty unique. It's a National Historic Place, National Historic Landmark, and there's several restaurants at the hotel, so you can do breakfast there. Personally, on a big hiking day, I like to get an early start, so have breakfast sent to the room and get out as quickly as possible.
All right. And so where are we starting?
So the next step, we have to get to the Hikers Express shuttle. This is how you get from the Village to the South Kaibab trailhead. And South Kaibab, there's no parking allowed. Grand Canyon National Park has a whole bus system, which is really the main way to get over there. We're going to aim for the 7 a.m. departure. This leads from the Backcountry Information Center. It's about a half a mile walk from El Tovar Hotel. So a nice half mile fresh air, chilly walk to kind of get the legs moving and warm up for the day and make sure we're on that bus. It's about a 15-minute drive over to the South Kaibab trailhead. And we get there, we're at 7,260 feet. So it's pretty chilly up here, probably around 40 degrees in November in the morning. But typically sunshine, Arizona, we're in a desert, so most days are sunny, more days than not. And when we get to the trailhead here, there are restrooms, so use them. It's kind of your last chance for quite a while. And we got everything filled up, and we're going to kind of start the hike. And immediately we hit into switchbacks. So we kind of round the corner and start heading down this Kaibab limestone upper layer of the Grand Canyon. It's the newest rocks within it. And the first, not even a mile, we get to the end of the switchbacks and we hit a ridge line that's called Ooh Ah Point. So it's literally ooh, as in ooh ah, how amazing is this view I'm staring at? And from there, the South Kaibab Trail is incredibly exposed. So you're basically on a saddle. So 1,000 feet to your left, 1,000 feet to your right. It's just sheer cliffs. The trail's perfectly safe, but you're really out there. And it's just this incredible experience. But we'll stop at Ooh Ah Point, take some pictures. I like to stop and take pictures along the way. I'm not in any rush to get to the bottom. It's not a race. So I know you guys are the same way, right?
We're the same way, and we're getting worse and worse. We just love taking pictures.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's awesome, right? To be out in nature and the beauty of it all. And yeah, may as well take your time and enjoy your surroundings. There are a lot of day hikers on this part of the trail. So a lot of people will come down to Ooh Ah Point, spend half an hour there, and then hike back up. That's something, if you only have 3-4 hours at Grand Canyon, I'd recommend it. It's a beautiful way to get away from the rim and kind of immerse yourself in it a little bit without too strenuous of a hike.
Well, let me ask you a question here, actually, about what we're looking at. So everybody kind of knows what the Grand Canyon looks like, right? I
Sure,
mean, we're
yeah.
this big open space with reds and oranges and everything. But how is it different as we're going down in?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So, first of all, when I look at the Grand Canyon from the rim, so it's exactly what you're describing, right? It's beautiful, all these different colors, different layers. But when you're looking from the top down, in a way, it's almost 2D, right? Because you've seen so many movies and pictures and posters of this kind of same image. It's beautiful. But when you're 1,000 feet below the rim, it's a 360-degree experience, which completely changes your perspective. The colors also change as you travel through the canyon too. So from the top is basically a forest. So when you're along the rim, you're surrounded by these beautiful green trees. As you descend, you lose the tree line and head into these desert badlands. So at this point, at Uwa Point, we're getting into some of the reds along either side of the trail. It's gorgeous. It's really something totally different from what you see at the rim, not even a mile away. So from Uwa Point, we're going to go just a little bit further to Cedar Ridge. Cedar Ridge is 1.5 miles from the trailhead, so we're not too far into it. We're over 1,000 feet below the rim now, and this is just like a large flat area. This is our first restroom break. We'll take off our packs, take some pictures, enjoy the views. And then from there, we hit our next set of switchbacks down to Skeleton Point. So Skeleton Point's 3 miles from the start. Now we're 2,000 feet below the rim. And this is the maximum day hike that the National Park Service recommends. So if you're feeling really adventurous and had a full day, but just one day, you can get all the way down to Skeleton Point and then head back. And the reason why is as soon as you leave Skeleton Point, you go down another series of about 1,000 feet of switchbacks. And at this point, you're just in complete desert. So fully exposed, not a lot of plant life. And by this point, even for us in November, it's starting to get warm. We're getting lower and lower. It's maybe 70s. So it's not that bad. We're going downhill. But you're feeling the sun after being in it for a few hours now. And from here, we get to the tip-off, which is kind of the last main point before you get into the inner canyon. The tip-off is the intersection of the South Kaibab Trail and the Tonto Trail. So we're on the Tonto Plateau, which is another geologic feature of the Grand Canyon. And the Tonto Trail runs parallel to the river and the rim. So it's more or less the halfway point. The tip-off is neat, though. They have a purpose-built shade structure. So if you're really feeling the sun, you can get out of it for a little bit. There's restrooms here. And this is where we'll stop for lunch. And this is also the first time you can really hear the river. So all of a sudden, you still can't see it, but you can hear in the background the roar of the water a little ways from here. And as you descend from the tip-off, within just a couple minutes, you hit the final couple of miles of switchbacks, and you can see straight down to the Colorado River. This is also where we get into the hottest part of the canyon and the oldest part of the canyon. So down here, the rocks on either side are 2 billion years old, which is really wild. There's not a lot of places in the world where you can walk amongst 2 billion-year-old rocks just right next to you. There's also very few hikers here. So anybody who's at this point is either doing what we're doing, going down to the bottom, or they're already on their way back up. I'd say by here, you're surrounded with fellow hikers, fellow adventurers, and it's a different vibe than a lot of the tourism that you see closer to the rim. And that changes your attitude, your mental aspect as well. It's pretty cool. So we're heading down. We can see the river. We can hear the river. And we're getting close to the Black Bridge. If you look at a map, if you're going to try to cross the Colorado River, to the west, the closest point is the Hoover Dam. And if you go to the east, it's all the way to Marble Canyon, which is kind of near Horseshoe Bend, near Page, Arizona. In between those two, that 300-mile expanse, there's only 2 ways that you can cross, and they're both pedestrian bridges. One of them's the Black Bridge. So this bridge originally was built in 1920, so it's 100 years old. They've redone it a few times since then. But what's kind of wild is the Native Americans actually carried these black cable, the suspensions for the bridge from the rim all the way down in order to build this. If you think back to 1920, there were no helicopter landings that could just, set these in place, right? And so it's this incredible engineering marvel. And as we get there, all of a sudden, we actually have to go through a tunnel. So we're kind of near the bottom, go through this tunnel. And as we get out of the tunnel, we are standing on the bridge directly above the Colorado River, 65 feet below our feet.
Wow. I had no idea about these bridges.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. You cannot see them from the rim. That's the other thing. So we're so far into the canyon now. We're all the way at the bottom. If you think back to that view from the rim of these beautiful colors, you'll notice there's no river in that view. You can't actually see the Colorado River. It's so far down. You can kind of see the top of the inner canyon, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say this, but until I met someone that rafted the river at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I didn't even put it together that there was a river down there because you really don't see it from the top. I just wasn't thinking about it, but
right.
I love that you pointed out when you can start to see it.
The first time I was at the Grand Canyon, I was 4 years old. I didn't see the river. I had no idea what, and it takes a while to get down to the point where you can see it. So it's not something that's immediately obvious. So where we are now, the same thing in reverse is true. You can't even see the rim anymore. We're fully immersed in the inner canyon in this place. It's just a really special experience. And crossing the bridge, it's very sturdy. I've felt totally secure. If you're nervous of heights or anything like that, you really don't have anything to be worried about on this one. The bridge doesn't sway, anything like that. And so we took our time shooting pictures and videos and kind of celebrating. And as soon as you cross the Colorado River, you get to the other side, and the trail is no longer the South Kaibab Trail. Now we're on the North Kaibab Trail. So the North Kaibab is another corridor trail, which goes all the way to the North Rim. We're going to take this trail. It's about a half a mile from here along the Colorado River and then eventually along Bright Angel Creek. And we get to this intersection where to the left is Bright Angel Campground. So if we're camping, this is the only designated place where you're allowed to camp. Or to the right, another quarter to half a mile is Phantom Ranch, which is where we're going to spend the night. But I'm happy to talk about camping because I know you had some questions about how all that works, right?
Yeah, well, I actually have questions about both. But yes, let's go into camping first. And then I really want to learn about Phantom Ranch because I had no idea there were accommodations down there.
That sounds good. So for camping, first and foremost, you have to get a permit. You cannot just bring your camping gear and camp. And permits are challenging. So here's the thing, whether you're camping or whether you stay at Phantom Ranch, it's not easy to get a space down here. And that's true in normal times. It's even more true now. Bright Angel Campground is operating at 50% capacity through at least the end of 2021, maybe into 2022 as well. And in Phantom Ranch, all of the dormitories are closed, which is about half of the number of spaces, essentially. The reason why they're doing critical maintenance work, and they figured it's better this way due to the pandemic anyway, so kind of between COVID and this critical infrastructure maintenance, they're at pretty reduced capacity. But to get a permit for camping, the way that it works, you want to search for the Corridor Availability Report. This is going to show you availability as of the date that they pulled the report. They update it a couple of times a month. And to give you an idea, so I just searched this for November 2020 right now. There are 2 individual days that have some availability. So it's not impossible.
But you have to be flexible.
Exactly. And that's going to be the key for Phantom Ranch as well. You want to be as flexible as you possibly can. Now, that's last minute availability. If you're trying to do this as far out as possible, which is my general advice, the way it works right now, you can fax in your request to the Backcountry Information Center. Their number is 928 638-2125. And there's a form online, fill that out, fax it into the Backcountry Information Center. So right now it's open for March 2021. So your window to fax in this request is from October 20th to November 1st at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So if you fax in your request within that window for March 2021, then you have equal chances of being accepted. They take all the requests that come in that window, put it in a lottery, and then if you win, whether you win or lose, you'll find out by email, typically within the next few weeks, whether you've gotten a spot.
Let's go into Phantom. Explain what it is.
Sure. Okay, so Phantom Ranch was built in 1922, and this is the only lodging below the rim in all directions. So it's very special from that standpoint alone, but it's also where all the adventurers, all the hikers, all the thrill seekers come to spend some time, whether you're staying there or not. So even if you're through hiking, even if you're camping, you'll probably go to Phantom Ranch at some point, and that is for the canteen. So everybody goes to the canteen, and I'd say a few things are famous about the canteen. So one, lemonade. Everybody goes and gets a lemonade at the canteen. Highly, highly recommended. After hiking miles and miles and thousands of feet, we're very tired, right? We finally arrived at this place, and we're ready for a nice cold refreshment. So lemonade it is.
I bet it's delicious at the end of all that.
It is a thing. It is an absolute thing. If you search Instagram for Phantom Ranch lemonade, there's quite a few on there. So that's one thing. But also you can write postcards. Phantom Ranch is unique in that they deliver the mail by mule. So
nice.
You can write postcards and letters, and you'll have the coveted mailed by mule stamp on your postcard or letter, which is really pretty wild. So they've operated this for a long time. They'll bring it by mule all the way back up to the rim and then out of the postal service from within the Grand Canyon National Park.
I love that. Do you know there's a spot in Great Smoky Mountain National Park that you get a delivered by llama stamp? It's very similar, but they have llamas to take it. Yeah, Mount LeConte. And so I sent a postcard from there to a friend of mine's little girl. It's so great for kids. They love receiving those.
Yeah, absolutely. I've sent a few from there, but even just like send one to yourself. It's kind of wild. So that's a fun thing. And this is also where the meals are. So even if you're not staying at Phantom Ranch, you can actually book meals at Phantom Ranch. There are breakfast and dinners, which are normally sit down. They're to go right now due to COVID. They also have packed lunches that you can order. So one trip, or I guess a trick for campers, is that even if you're carrying all your camping gear, but you don't want to carry your cooking gear, you don't want to carry as much food, you can still get meals through Phantom Ranch. The key is everything has to be booked ahead of time. So you cannot just show up and order a meal. They do have snacks that are by order. So again, if you want a lemonade or you want some Oreos, they've got some some snacks right then and there. But otherwise, if you want breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you have to go online and order that ahead of time.
And the campground and Phantom Ranch, how far apart are they from each other?
Less than half a mile, and it's flat. You're just along the creek. So just a few minutes walking, and people go back and forth all the time. So yeah, it's no big deal to get from one to the other.
Yeah, great.
And so Phantom Ranch is special for kind of all these reasons. The dormitories are closed, at least through the end of 2021, but the cabins are still available. And for availability on the website and for the lottery, it's 1 to 4 people per cabin. You have to choose 1, 2, 3, or 4 individuals, and your odds are equal, regardless of whether you choose 1, 2, 3, or 4, because they're selling them by the cabin. If you choose one person, you're going to have a cabin to yourself. You're not going to be randomly assigned with other people. So it's pretty wild to have your own private cabin at the bottom of the Grand Canyon,
yeah,
miles away from many cars and roads and really anything. I mean, you're just kind of down by the river, sight unseen from the rim. Nobody can really even see where you're at.
So in these Phantom Ranch cabins, what does it look like in there? What's in a cabin?
Bunk beds. So there's almost always 2 bunk beds. So those are your 4 individual spots. They have their own private bathroom, but not showers. There is a separate shower room, which is normally great. However, they are closed as part of the infrastructure work that's going on right now. So yeah, it's usually a couple of bunk beds, a sink, a toilet, a little bit of open sitting space. So it's small and cozy, but it does the job, and it's nice to have your own space at the end of a long hike.
Yeah, more than I thought would be in there. I didn't realize the sink would be in there. That's nice.
Yep. Usually they provide a washcloth, and in normal times they would provide towels too. So it's just a few less things that you have to bring down with you.
Yeah. How luxurious it is down there. So nice.
In a way, yeah. When you consider the fact that you're in this 300 by 20 by 1+ mile gorge in the earth, it's incredible to have all of this down there. It's not a 5-star hotel, but that's not the point either. And purely because of this, it's very, very difficult to get in, to get a spot, to get a reservation. And so there are a few ways to do this, but in general, Phantom Ranch is sold out. So what are your options? One, there is a lottery system, and my recommendation is apply for the lottery. So right now, for example, this is October. If we went onto the website, which is going to be in the show notes, you can see you can enter the lottery for December 2021. So right now, that's how far out the booking window extends. And you can choose your top 3 choices for dates. My recommendation is be as flexible as possible. So you can actually submit for 1 night, 1 cabin, any date from December 1st to the 31st, 2021. That's going to be your best odds by definition, just because if there are dates in lower demand, you have higher likelihood of getting those. The other thing, it'll give you the option for 2, 3, or 4 nights. While it would be amazing to have 2 or 3 or 4 nights at the bottom of the canyon, your odds lower dramatically if that's your request. So again, your best odds are going to be requesting 1 night. And then weekends tend to be a little bit tougher than weekdays. Your odds on any given day are typically between 3 and 7%. So you're pretty low odds across the board.
Wow.
But it's not zero, right? If you do this enough, you'll win it eventually. And I have won the lottery a few times after many, many months and years of applying. So don't get discouraged. It's something that for me, I have a calendar entry, and every month I enter the lottery and see what I can get. And once in a while you win.
Nice. I like that. And then you're going on a trip.
And then you're going on a trip, and you've got over a year to plan.
Yeah.
You got over a year to do your workouts and get in hiking shape and get ready for this. But that said, that's not the only way to get in. The other thing you can do, you can search live availability. So right now, if we went on the website, it would show through the end of October 2021. And if there's any availability at all, it'll show. Again, most of the time there's not. But for me, I check this basically every day. And I'd say once every few weeks, there's 1 random night that opens up.
And that's like someone canceled.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So there's no penalty to cancel up until 45 days before your visit. So you typically get a lot of cancellations in the 45 to 60 days out window. And then also, if for some reason they go through all the lottery winners and there's still space available, they make that space available on the 1st of the month after the lottery is conducted. So for example, on November 1st this year, any availability for November 2021 is going to show up. And there's usually not any, but sometimes there'll be a night or 2 that randomly has a spot. And then lastly, there is last minute availability. So you might see something that's a week from now. Keep in mind, if you book anything fewer than 45 days out, it becomes non-refundable. So make sure you're able to go before you just kind of to jump on that reservation. And then that cuts off at 3 days. So the final 3 days, the trick to this is the Bright Angel Transportation Desk, which is inside a Bright Angel Lodge. At the lodge, to the left of the check-in desk, is this information station that's manned by the rangers, and they're in charge of Phantom Ranch. So if somebody doesn't confirm or they're a no-show, then you do get some very last-minute availability, and you can book something for the same night or tomorrow night. The trick, again, to this, you have to be ready to hike all the way to the bottom and have flexibility in whatever your existing accommodations are and that kind of thing. But there are spots that open up last minute too.
That's great to know about all those options.
If you do it enough, you'll be able to get something eventually. And I highly recommend, if you're interested, at the very least, apply for the lottery over a year out. And if you can get a spot, then you've got a year to plan.
So we slept at Phantom Ranch. Now we're going to do our next day. How are we going back? Because we're taking a different way, right?
Yeah, so wake up, we're in this beauty. There's lots of wild animals that come through Phantom Ranch. So first thing in the morning is a great time to see wildlife. We'll have breakfast at the canteen, so that's already taken care of for us. It's all you can eat, so definitely we want to fill up. We've got a long day ahead of us, and then we're off. So the first half a mile are kind of through the ranch and the campground, so it's flat and nice and steady. It's a good warm-up to kind of get us ready for our day. And within about a half a mile, we meet the endpoint of the Bright Angel Trail. So that trail is what we're going to take all the way back to the South Rim. So we make a right-hand turn, cross the Bright Angel Creek, and we're on the Bright Angel Trail. A little bit further on, we get to the Silver Bridge. So I mentioned before, there's 2 bridges across the river. This is the other one. It's only about 700 meters downstream of the Black Bridge, so you can see both bridges at the same time. This one is a little more intense than the Black Bridge as far as what it looks like. So this one sways a little bit in the wind. It's perfectly secure, but you're going to feel it moving. The other thing is it's metal grated, so you can actually see below your feet, which is a little bit of a fun sensation. And you can see some of the whitewater rapids and whatnot. The Colorado River flows pretty fast through this area. The only other thing I'll say is if heights or bridges make you nervous, you can go back to the Black Bridge that we came across on day 1. You cannot see through the bottom of that one. It's more secure. They're both perfectly safe, but it's about a 1.5 mile detour. But for us, it's nice to check out both bridges, and it's a little bit shorter. We got a long day anyway, so we're going to take the most direct route. So we crossed this bridge, and then we're in sand dunes, which is crazy. We're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and we're hiking in sand dunes. So the next 1.5 miles are mostly flat along the Colorado River. If you're in the summer, this is where the heat is just beating on you. But we're doing this in November, so it's a nice, cool, maybe 50, 60 degrees first thing in the morning. And this section of the hike, you could very well not see anybody for a couple miles, which is nice. So I like hiking in that solitude. And even though you're in Grand Canyon National Park and there's all these people on the rim, there's nobody where we are. And eventually we get to the Pipe Creek Rest House. And this is our first kind of restroom break, but it's also where the trail turns away from the Colorado River. So the first 2 miles, it's a nice, easy way to start the day. But ultimately, we got to hike all the way out of this canyon. So we're going to be doing quite a bit uphill today. And that starts after this Pipe Creek Rest House. So from here, so the next mile along Pipe Creek, it's kind of slow and steady uphill. It's not too bad. But we get to mile 3, and this is where we hit the Devil's Corkscrew, which, yeah, it's named appropriately. It's for a lot of people, this is not the fun part of the hike. It is neat. So part of the reason in the naming, it's 1,000 feet of switchbacks in less than a mile. So it's a pretty steep uphill section here. But also the rock all of a sudden becomes jet black, which is kind of wild. So we're in all these reds and oranges, but this section just pure jet black. So in the heat, this really heats up quite a bit. So between that and the switchbacks, it's the Devil's Corkscrew. But part of what's wild here, so these rocks are also 2 billion years old. So this is similar to on South Kaibab, this end of the Inner Canyon, we're in some of the oldest rocks in the Grand Canyon and anywhere in the world. It can take a little while to get up this 1,000 feet of switchbacks. But once we get on top, we leave the jet black rock. and we hit into some of the sandstone. And the next mile and a half is kind of slow and steady uphill. We're actually walking on large flat rocks, so it's not like normal hiking trail conditions, but instead it's more these large exposed sheets of sandstone. And we're right along, now it's Garden Creek off to our side. So what's cool in the Grand Canyon is there's lots of rivers and creeks and whatnot, but they start and end seemingly at random because they carve right through the layers of stone. So you can have right next to you this open stone, and then all of a sudden there's a roaring rapid that comes out of the rock. Yeah, so this part of the trail is pretty neat where you kind of see all sides of that, and we're going back and forth in areas where the river is right next to us, and then it just disappears. So that's kind of a fun section. And this is also typically shaded since we're in kind of a more of a rocky area. And eventually we cross back to the Tonto Trail, and it's kind of starting to feel a little bit familiar. So we're back on the Tonto Plateau, and all of a sudden here we start to see these huge cottonwood and willow trees. So there's this beautiful oasis in the middle of the desert, and this is Indian Garden. So Indian Garden is one of the 3 designated campgrounds along the corridor trail. So you can actually camp here as well. So if you wanted to do a 3-day, 2-night inner canyon trip, you could spend 1 night at Bright Angel Campground at the bottom and then another night here at Indian Garden. And I'd highly recommend that if you are going to spend some time camping. It's a beautiful campground. We're along, at this point, the river is just like a slow and steady trickle. And we've got these beautiful leaves and trees, and lots of wild animals come in here as well. And this is where we're going to have lunch for the day. We can fill up our water, again, provided there's no pipe breaks or anything like that. But typically water is available year-round at Indian Garden. And so we're going to take our packs off and just enjoy the spectacular scenery.
Is the reservation process for that campground the same as the one down at the bottom?
Yes, so same process. On the form, you'll see you can choose which campgrounds you're requesting, and you can simply request Indian Garden Campground for one of your nights. And if you don't want to go all the way to the bottom, this is an option too. It's still a pretty challenging hike, but you can spend a night at Indian Garden or even a couple nights here, and there's other trails to explore in the area. One of the best hikes anywhere in the Grand Canyon is out to Plateau Point, which is only 1.5 miles from Indian Garden on a separate trail. But again, we're not going to do that today because we've got a long day as it is.
Yeah, that's great to know, though.
So Indian Garden's gorgeous, and I like to take at least an hour, just, really relax. From here, we can also see the South Rim for the first time. You can't really see all the people at this point, but you can see the top of where we're going to end up. And it's imposing, right? It's we're looking at, we're still over 3,000 feet below the rim. So we've made some progress up the Devil's Corkscrew, but we still have a long ways to go. And the last 4.5 miles from Indian Garden, the first mile out of there is not too bad. It's kind of a slow and steady uphill. But once you hit about the 3.5 mile mark from the top, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's just brutal. It is. It's the hardest part of the whole thing. And it's hard for a few reasons. I mean, one, it's 3.5 miles of nonstop switchbacks. So it's 3,000 feet over this 3.5 miles. That alone is difficult. But then we've already put quite a few miles on our legs to get to this point. So you're already pretty tired. And then the last thing is, this starts at about 3,800 feet, but we're going up to over 6,800 feet. So as you get higher, there's less and less oxygen. So for me, we live in the low desert where we're at 1,000 feet here, and hiking at 5, 6, almost 7,000 feet, you get winded a lot faster because of the lack of oxygen up there. So it's difficult, but mentally, I'd say a few things. So there are waypoints, there's places to stop. So it's not just 3.5 miles nonstop. There are a couple of rest houses. One is the 3-mile rest house, which is exactly 3 miles below the trailhead. There's restrooms here. Seasonally, there's water, but by November, they've shut it off because it can get down to freezing. So we're not going to be able to fill up our water here. But if it is on and you're hiking a different time of year, always recommend fill up whenever you can in the canyon, because again, these pipe breaks can happen at any time. So if you have filtered water available to you, make sure that 3 liter is completely full. But this is a good place to have a snack and take a little bit of a rest. There's another one at the 1.5 mile mark. So 1.5 mile rest house, again, 1.5 miles below the rim. At this point, we're only 1,000 feet away. So you can really start to see some of the trees, for example, up at the south rim, and maybe some of the people as well. These are also popular day hikes. So once we get to the 1.5 mile and the 3 mile rest house, you do get a lot of people who are just coming down from the day. And that's a great way to get into the canyon. Again, it's a totally different perspective than just being along the rim. So if you only have half a day, hike down Bright Angel to the 1.5 mile rest house. But for us, we're pretty wiped because we've hiked all the way to the bottom, right? There are restrooms again, there's seasonal water, and we'll kind of snack up. This is where you need those Pringles. You need your Snickers bar or whatever it is to keep you going. You got to get some energy.
I'm just imagining people in their like Yellowstone hoodie and jeans and stuff, and then you're like just completely filthy.
You do have to be prepared for tourists to take pictures of you. That comes with the territory. I've had quite a few people, as you kind of get to the end of these hikes, people will ask. They can see you have all the gear, right? So they'll ask, "Did you go all the way to the bottom?" And and so people are into that and usually pretty curious. And usually by this point, I have a story to tell, But it can be a little interesting when you get tourism mixed in with the big hiking and all that. But they tend to be pretty respectful and make way for you if you're passing them, that kind of thing. And then the last couple of waypoints that we see, there's a couple of tunnels through the Kaibab limestone. So not only are we going up and down these cliffs, but we're going through them. So they've blasted a couple of tunnels to get through the sheer cliff walls. And the first one's it's about 3/4 mile from the top. And then the second one's only 0.2 miles away. From here, we can actually see buildings again. And there's usually quite a few picture takers at this point of the trail. And from there, we kind of round the last corner, and 6,850 feet at elevation, we've made it to the Bright Angel Trailhead. We did it.
Nice. We did it. I feel like I emotionally just went through that hike. That was
awesome.
Crazy. I want to go do it now.
I could not recommend it highly enough. It is strenuous, but you guys hike a lot, so you guys would be great.
We might have to do the 3-day version. I don't know.
Fair enough.
So we're up at the end. What are we doing to finish out the day?
It. Yeah, so the good news is we get to the trailhead, and right next to us is the Bright Angel Lodge, which is next to El Tovar Lodge. So we're right in the village, in the heart of everything. We don't have to get on another bus or walk any further. And at the Bright Angel Lodge, there's an ice cream parlor right there. So that's my first stop, straight to ice cream and enjoy our accomplishment. The views are incredible. You can really see where you just were looking down on the trail. We're getting pretty close to sunset at this point, so there's usually spectacular sunsets at the Grand Canyon from the rim. And then, from there are restaurants in the lodges. So even if you're not staying in Grand Canyon National Park, have dinner at Bright Angel Lodge, make life a little bit easier, and then you can kind of head off from there. But at this point, we're pretty exhausted. We just did 17.5 miles and a mile vertical in one night, 2 days. So ready for some ice cream. And I would spend this night either back at El Tovar or at Bright Angel Lodge, which is right next door.
Yeah, there's nothing like, well, first of all, I love that there was ice cream and lemonade in this hike. But second of all, there is just nothing like having that dinner in the lodge after a big, long hike like this. You're just sweaty and disgusting, but you don't even care. Like, everything's delicious.
Exactly. And the Bright Angel restaurant too, they know this, right? So like it's very sweaty, exhausted, hiker friendly.
Nice. Of this whole hike, where are your favorite spots for pictures?
Well, the best is on the Black Bridge, just because it's so unique, so inaccessible. And right when you get off the bridge, the trail actually goes under it. So there's an awesome spot where you can capture the whole river with the bridge on top. So that's just spectacular. But in terms of like more accessible. If you were just spending a few hours, Point on South Kaibab is truly phenomenal, and it's not even a mile from the trailhead. And then even just going down to the 1.5 mile rest house on Bright Angel, it's kind of the same thing. You're fully immersed in the canyon. That section of the hike too on Bright Angel, if you're near the 1.5 mile rest house around sunrise, you can see the sun hits the limestone. So the colors, these whites and reds, light up against the forest there. So those are probably my favorite spots. But anywhere along the rim is gorgeous. I mean, there's a rim trail that covers about 13 miles of lookouts along the rim that is pretty unique as well. It's more of a touristy area because you're right on the rim in the middle of the national park, but it's still spectacular views. And I don't think there's a bad place to take a picture of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, that is a good segue to my next question, though. Do you think there is a part of the Grand Canyon that is overrated?
No, I don't. Even if you have an hour to go to the Grand Canyon, I still recommend going. It's just stunning. Something about seeing it in person, even if you've seen, a million movies and posters and whatnot, even that iconic shot, it's still, to be there and see the birds flying and feel the rush of the wind. It's still unique. It's still special. And it's still something that I would not pass up. That being said, go down, be one of those 7% who hikes into the canyon, be one of the 1% who gets to the bottom, and totally, totally different. But I don't think any part of it's overrated.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your incredible hike with us. I mean, it sounds really amazing. I really want to do it. I hope other people are inspired to also want to do it. But I hope you can also still get lottery tickets in the future.
Yeah.
Not too many people.
Yeah, exactly. If you're listening, we want you to do this. But for everyone else out there, pay no attention to this advice.
Yeah, don't tell your friends.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. It was so great to have you with me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, if you want to grab the show notes for this episode, head on over to localsknowbestpodcast.com/7. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to leave a review in Apple Podcasts and let me know what your favorite part was. Make sure to check out the Instagram post for the episode at Sinners Travels, and please feel free to share the episode with your favorite travel buddy. Thanks so much. Catch you next time on Locals Know Best.